It's recording, and we're running. So last time when it didn't record, obviously we were going over clipping mask. So let's go over that again today. So that's basically how we're going to get our section and our plan, as I've stated. The first thing that you need is, of course, a rectangle. Could be any rectangle, doesn't really matter. We're going to use clipping plane, hit it. We're going to choose the boundaries of our rectangle, right? And then what's nice is we can take that clipping mask and, of course, move it as necessary. So, of course, we can get our floor plan model. I can make 2D of that situation. Obviously, I'm going to have to fill in some things. I'm going to have to fix some of that 2D, to say the least. However, some of the questions that some students had was, how many levels do I need? You need at least 2, right? So I will say you need at least this one, right? The bottom floor and the top floor. Now, if you have something sort of in between that you want to show us, maybe like a level 2, that would be great, right? So maybe it's 3 floor plans. And that really depends on really what you want to show, right? If you want to kind of show all that mess that's happening in the middle, I would suggest it, right? Especially if you've been working hard on it. However, if you want a section, quite simple. You take the clipping mask again, rotate it, hold shift and make it 90 degrees. And of course, we can get that information. Now, I'm only requiring 1 section. Normally I would do 2. And it's really just the cross sections. Obviously, we can get that one, we can get the other side. In fact, it's quite easy. Just flip it, and we'll get the other side. So yeah, just wanted to go over that. Of course, you can use it as an object. It's still, you can apply gumball to it. You can do all kinds of things. So pretty nice. You can also do a section perspective if you wanted, by of course enacting 2-point. And you could really get a section perspective out of there too. A little bit harder though. We'll take that off. Whoa, so two-dimensional, bro. Anyway, let's go ahead and reset that. Set camera view, put it back on perspective. Good to go. So the next thing I wanted to go over is actually the exploded diagram. And what I would recommend is, like always, make a new model, because you never know what's going to happen. And of course, you don't want to do that all over again. So I'll make a copy, put it over here. And we basically want to set it up so that we can put it together all in one spot in Grasshopper, right? Because we do want this exploded Axon to be a 45-45. So we will need that Grasshopper script again, right? The one that said military projection. Of course, you can find it on our Miro board, right, under the Google Drive. So first things first, we need to explode it, right? We need to maybe group some things. So for instance, this would be a really great case is, if I layered everything, maybe I have structure, maybe I have columns in here. I should have been much more organized, right? Because now I have to kind of go back, select all these, make a structure layer. So just in case you're in the same boat as I am right now, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to find all my structure pieces, and I'm just holding shift and selecting. If I accidentally click on something I don't want, right, I can hold control if I'm on Mac, or option on Mac, and of course deselect that. Maybe it's not option. Oh, it's command. Never mind. You mess up, you live, you learn. So without taking too long, let's get these. I just want the curve, bless you. Well, let's get all these structure pieces so I don't have to do this again. I can just put them on a layer. And for the most part, we've almost got them. I'm always getting that curve. It's all right. Say you did want to filter something out of your selection. I did forget to mention this, but this little funnel looking thing right there is kind of nice. So if you have a bunch of things selected and you're like, man, I don't want the curves of that selection, you can simply uncheck curves. And what's kind of nice, it's going to deselect those curves that I accidentally clicked on. However, since this is a poly surface, if I accidentally click on poly surface, it will get rid of the selection that I just did. So do be careful about that. But we got our structure for the most part. Let's put it on a layer. Let's call it structure. And let's go ahead and make it that. Change objects to the layer. And of course it changes to a gray. What's nice about that though is I can literally turn everything off and just get that piece, right? Nice. So I can group it. And I do recommend grouping them because we are going to move them around, right? Maybe by level, maybe by structure. Don't need score, don't need cut, don't need make 2D. All right, so we have some of our layers. And I may want to obviously explode them. So in my case, this is my copy. So I can move it around as much as possible. I think I want to get this view, right? So kind of the first thing that I want to do is actually establish the view. That seems pretty good. I think I'll leave actually the structure with the ground in this case. And let's go ahead and take my layers one at a time. So maybe these green pieces, right? And I can actually lock a layer so I don't accidentally move it, and basically move it up, right? Well, I'll want to use gumball so that it's perfectly straight. Oh, wrong one. There we go. And basically get it out of frame, right? I may want some overlap right between my structure and my pieces. That's okay. However, if you do want a lot of space, you can, right? And just apply that space. Next one, we'll get this guy. Maybe we explode it out this way, right? Not everything has to be literally, just this stack, a stack of stack. We could further diagram it, right? And say that this piece actually goes in, right? So we'll pull it out a little bit. That's looking pretty good. So very similar to our first two exercises, right? We'll take this piece, one at a time. This one can go up too, why not? It kind of goes with that piece, doesn't it? Doesn't look like anything's on that layer. And we've got our default that I should have separated. That's okay. Obviously I want to take this piece out. Maybe we put it over here, see it a little bit better. But in terms of explodedness, right, I'll let that be up to you. And I'm just trying it a couple different ways, right? What might be the best way to put that diagram together, right? That's looking pretty exploded. Not too shabby. Since we made a copy, we can go ahead and take that, and it is locked, so I do want to unlock it. And let's go to Grasshopper. We'll use our military projection. We'll clear our values, so we can clear value. We'll make a selection, all these breps. Awesome. We'll go ahead and right click, set multiple breps. Everything should start to turn gray and not have any orange in it. And you should end up with something, right? Of course, that something will only look correct in the top view, so let's check it out. Nice. All right, we've definitely got an exploded diagram going on. What is nice about this is, I can do this in real time. So let's move this to the side a little bit. I might change the object. Actually, it just keeps getting closer and closer, right? So that doesn't really help. That's okay. We'll leave it the way it is. But we can move our components, right? Say that something was too far out, we can basically move that in a little bit. Maybe not so much. Right, but at least an exploded diagram at a 45-45, right? Definitely meets the bill, so let's go ahead and bake it. So I'm going to go back to Grasshopper. I'm going to go to my brep, right click, and bake it. We should put it on a certain layer. You should have probably make a new layer and call it Axon model. That's what I should do. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to our grasshopper. Same thing, right click, bake, and we'll set it to our Axon model. Sweet, now we've got the model of it. We can go ahead and turn everything off so we can have an easier time looking at this thing. Sweet. You'll notice that the red is still enacted, and it's because our grasshopper is still open. So let's get that grasshopper. And we can basically turn the preview off. You can leave grasshopper running just in case you need to do something again, but that preview can definitely get in the way. So let's take a look at the top. It's looking pretty good. Not too shabby if I say so. Let's go ahead and make 2D. We'll maintain source layers, not that it matters in this case. We can enact hidden lines if we want to. Not necessarily a requirement in this exploded axon. It could get really hairy if we do maintain, as you guys saw like in the structure, right? Don't get me wrong, I think the mass and the forms and the volumes could have this hidden line background, but you know, it's going to get messy in the structure and things like that. However, nothing's there because, well, my layers are turned off. So let's go ahead and turn those on. Sweet, looking nice. Yeah, you might want those hidden lines for sure. Of course, we can turn them on. I think it does turn on both. You sort of see them for what they are. And they're really actually kind of hard to tell, right? At least right now it looks really good, but as you guys know, once you see all of those lines, it can get pretty hairy. That looks okay, right? Because it does start to express the volume really nice. These volumes look okay, right? Because it does start to express some of those things. You might want to dice some out here, right? Especially when it's an overlapping of your stairs, it can get really hairy. So I will say the hidden line isn't absolutely necessary. What is necessary is actually showing the user where these go, right? So I pulled out this piece that way, I pulled out that piece this way, and so on and so forth. So we want to match those angles, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a line, right? Now I'm just going to fake it till I make it, right? And kind of put something there, right? I can take that exact same line. Oh, I've got my filter on it. It even flashes a little bit. It's like, hey, I see you're trying to click on a curve, but you can't. So copy, and we basically just want to kind of help the user understand where this is at. All right, so I'm going to just basically put 3 points. Not too shabby, right? We can start to indicate arrows and with these lines in Illustrator. Right? Let's take it a step further. This one came in from the side, so we'll take that one. And again, we just really match that 45-degree angle. Not a big deal there. Copy. So again, further drawing on these is super helpful. And yeah, my lines might overlap a little bit. That's okay. I could fake it till I make it even more and just take this piece minus these pieces. Guess that's a solid piece. No, it's not live. But yeah, let's get all those pieces. Hold Command on the Macintosh to deselect, Control on Windows to deselect. And I think there's one right there. There we go. But yeah, say I needed to move that a little bit more, I could, right? Nice. Now it's out of the way of most of the pieces. However, it's going to make my drawing a little bit larger. That's okay. But obviously I'm just making these lines so that I can eventually turn them into dash lines. I could do that here also though. Keep that in mind. I could take the line itself. And I like to do this sort of individually. You can do it by the layer, but it's going to change all of that layer. So sometimes I do it individually, especially if I know I want those to be dash lined, I'll basically just change their properties. So I can go to layer and I can change it to a dash layer, for instance, or I can go to line type and obviously change it to like a hidden layer, right? Now keep in mind, it's going to be at a weird scale, right? In our case, it's going to be 1:1. So as you can imagine, we have to zoom in a lot to kind of actually see it. But again, as you guys know, it'll pull into Illustrator with a default dash. So sweet. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's go put it in Illustrator. And like I said, I wanted to show you that we can eventually take this workflow into Photoshop, right? Just in case you haven't seen it before. And obviously I know for most of us, especially if you've had me, definitely know about this workflow. So we'll go ahead and export it. We'll turn it into a DWG in my case. However, you can also choose an AI file, right? So there is a couple of options. And it really depends on which Illustrator that you're trying to open this in. Since I have 2021 Illustrator, it seems to work a little bit better for me if I use AutoCAD DWG. So that's what we'll do today. Desktop, export, sweet. And we'll go ahead and open up Illustrator. We'll close Grasshopper for now and minimize that. Oh wow, I have 2023 now? That can't be good. Oh, maybe I updated it. I can't remember. I've been doing too many computer things lately. But let's go ahead and open that exact DWG. It's going to ask us to scale it to fit artboard. I would definitely recommend it, right? Just because I haven't really said these have to be at a particular scale yet. However, if you wanted to, what could you do? If it had to be to scale, what would we do? Could I do that calculation? I could. Because it is at 1:1, right? I could say, well, in my units, I know that my units are feet, right? So I could say that basically something equals something units. So in our case, if I wanted it to be 1/8 scale, I could do 0.125, right? However, this doesn't have any feet, right? So I would actually have to divide 0.125 by 12. For the sake of argument though, let's go ahead and just scale it to fit artboard. Another way that I could achieve that scale, especially with an Axon, because an Axon is true scale, what you measure on that Axon is actually what you get. I could just make a foot, right? So I can take a line and I can make 12 inches. What's nice is, well, then I could take that little tiny measurement and apply it to Illustrator. Right? Obviously this would be part of my export. And then I would line that in here. Right? So obviously my last artboard that I used was something ridiculous, so let's go ahead and change that. In my case, I'm asking for an 11:17 in portrait for the Axon. Right? So I'm going to go to Document Setup, Edit Artboards, and just click on this guy. Yeah, that's way off. Right? So let's go with 11 inches wide and 17 inches tall. Sweet, much better. And click on really any tool and it's going to go back to the drawing space. And like I said, this doesn't really have to be at a scale yet. But let's face it, in Studio, a lot of things have to be to scale. So I don't want to lose my proportions. Doesn't look like I actually got everything, but it could just be Illustrator saying I'm really slow today. Sweet. It's just Illustrator being slow. I'm going to hold Shift again, that way it stays proportional. And I don't really need to take up the whole white space. I do want to compose this nicely. And that's looking pretty good. Now for this one, I don't particularly want this one to be photoshopped. However, you're more than welcome to test some things out. For instance, couldn't I also get a rendered view of this shot and slip it underneath? Absolutely. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash. Hold on. Obviously I could take that shot and I could slip it underneath. I could even Photoshop that shot first and, tweak it a little bit in terms of shade and shadow and things like that. wouldn't be a bad idea to see some shade and shadow on that Axon. I will say, at least for the sake of tutorial and the assignment, I do want to see shade and shadow on at least one element, right? So let's talk about the parts that we can Photoshop, right? So we've gone over the Axon, we've gone over how to put it in Illustrator, and at least what we want for the assignment. Let's get some floor plans, or at least we had this section last time. Let's go ahead and take that. Let's say that was perfect. Maybe I want to complete my drawing actually. After all, it is going to be a section. Enter. Let's go ahead and join those. Sweet. You know, I would go ahead and trim those things right now because, again, it would be absolutely impossible. Not impossible, I guess, but in Illustrator it would be a pain, to say the least. So I do want to do all my drawings. If I wanted to scale figure, you know, I can go to pimpmydrawing.com, or I could simply even put a picture of myself in here and quite literally trace it. Go, there's my arm. Sorry, I'm not the best drawer in digital space, but we'll say that's me for today. I've got a limp. Anyway, it's a ghost. Anyway, that'll work. But again, I want to do all of my drawing here. So for instance, we talked about hatching last time. Let's go ahead and talk about that. So let's hatch it. You know, I didn't get to record that last time, so I don't want to rob you of that recording. Boundary mode is awesome. I can basically just kind of fill in the blanks here. So this is where I need to know my model at least kind of well. Am I cutting through this? Am I not? Let's go for it. Like I said, in my case, I'm going for the sake of speed in the tutorial. So, of course, be more accurate. In our case, let's say that, I don't know, some of these are cut or something. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I'd want to investigate the model for sure. Maybe it's not cutting there, maybe it is here. Like I said, for the sake of tutorial. But this would basically be a hatch. And the reason for this is, well, it's a lot easier to change the specifics in Illustrator, right? For instance, the ground section cut. So that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna hit enter. And let's get fancy with the spices today. Let's go with a hatch 1. Let's go at a 45-degree angle. And if you guys remember last time, we had to go into like the 550s. So look, it looks like we nailed it the first time. But yeah, we've got some poche. It's looking good. Let's go ahead and take it into Illustrator. Export selected. In my case, DWG. Let's try AI file just to kind of show you it's the exact same thing. Am I missing it? There it is. Now this is where we can actually get really specific with the scale of it. In my case, I'm just going to leave it at default and just open it. But like I said, we could do the same thing. We just draw a foot on here and then make sure that that foot equals whatever that you want it to. So I'll go over that a little bit in Illustrator. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and draw a line because for the assignment, these do need to be to scale. So let's go ahead and say at a quarter equals a quarter inch equals a foot. So let's go ahead and draw a foot. Awesome. And let's go ahead and actually export that as well. We'll just overwrite the one that we just made. It's like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Export. Sweet. So first things first, let's get that drawing to scale. So let's go ahead and open it. Because I don't want to rob you of how to put something to scale. Not sure why it's defaulting at 3x48, but that's neither here or there. Easy fix though. This one can be at landscape, so I'm going to go with 17x11. Sweet. And for the most part, it fits even right now. But as you can see, that hatching definitely turned into what we would call poche, right? Possibly the worst line weights ever, but you know, at least we have this little marker. So the next thing that I would do is Command R or Control R and bring up my rulers. Now by default, it's usually set in like picas or pixels. I'm really still unsure what a pica is, but I hope that it's related to Pikachu. So it is in inches, we're good. The next thing I need to do is make sure that this little piece, if I want it to be a quarter inch equals a foot, what does it need to be on the paper? Don't overthink it. 1/4 inch, right? Because that's what needs to equal a foot. If it needed to be a 1/2 inch, what would I do? I'd make the whole thing a 1/2 inch, right? So let's explain that a little bit. I'm going to drag these lines out, and again, this might be a review for a lot of us. I'm going to lock it into that, that 2 inches. You'll kind of see that it locks in right there, and then you'll see when you pull them out, if you hold Shift, it kind of gets quarterly, right? So in our case, that would be a 1/4, that would be a 1/2, right? 3/4, and an inch, right? So in my case, I just want one bump from there, and this little space in between is a 1/4. Funny enough, we're actually very close. So we want to get everything except, right? Well, we want to get this guy too. And then I'm basically just going to move it with my arrows. Dang, talk about we got really close. Not too bad. It's pretty much at a 1/4 scale. I think it does need to be technically a little bit smaller. But we essentially just need to align that little 1 foot line and do the best of your ability. Obviously, we're zooming in so much that, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely minuscule. But again, perfectionist is our art. So let's get it dialed in just right. And again, hold Shift so that you don't mess with your proportions. And I'm holding spacebar to basically pan the way that I'm doing, and nailed it, right? Anyway, should have drew a better person. But yeah, now it's at 1/4 scale and we're good to go. So the next thing that I wanted to go over is how we can apply some Photoshop to this. And again, if you've already had my rotation, piece of cake, right? Just drag it in. However, this would be done after we establish the line weights because, well, we can't change the color of these lines or the line weights in Photoshop. So it is a raster program. Since this is still a vector program, we're using it for our workflow. And we're going to go ahead and change those. It's possibly the fastest my computer has run in a while. Made some changes. Let's take those. I don't want green lines. So it should be this easy, guys. I mean, especially when you work in Illustrator, I don't have to draw a thing. Maybe I add some text, but that's a different story. I should literally just be changing the layers and calling it a day. Let's take those. We'll make those a little darker. 0.77. I don't know. I like to use doubles for some reason. It's just kind of something I've always done. But again, never using true black because we know that the printer is going to print darker anyway, right? So don't use true black. In fact, the more you get into this grayscale, the more you're going to actually get this analog feel. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but some of the comments from our class versus, say, the other graphics class, the computer graphics class, every professor has been like, wow, yours actually look a little closer to an analog drawing. So that you should kind of pat yourself on the back for that one because that's what I've been explaining, right? We should be able to kind of trick somebody. Is this computer? Is this drafted? I don't know, right? We're definitely trying to blend that reality of digital and analog because there is something to be said about analog. It does look better, in one man's opinion. Unfortunately, that opinion is usually across the board. Even people that are all in digital, they look at analog drawing and they're like, damn, how does it look that good, right? So what I'm trying to say is, well, the best digital people, they know how to draw too, right? That's for sure. And they know how to apply these exact same principles. Are you guys familiar with Studio Ghibli? Yeah. The guy can't draw anything digitally, right? And he actually almost quit his whole company because of that very fact. I don't know if you ever watched the interview. It's like a Japanese escamilla. It's actually pretty funny. But yeah, he treats his art really the same way. There's something about the analog that just can't be matched. But what is nice, there's an update, is he's actually learning digital technology and applying that same principle. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's finish this drawing. So we got those components. Another thing to be said is, well, maybe I accidentally didn't get a certain layer. So I do want to show you a little bit more about Illustrator. We can click on something, especially if I want all of those hatches and I don't want to do them one at a time. I can select one, I can go to select same, and in my case I can go with fill and stroke, right? In my case it's just the fill color because I want to make sure that I get all of those. And obviously in my case I don't want true black there. I want to soften it up, and I may even change it in Photoshop, and that would be okay too. That's still really thick. Nice. So yeah, we got a drawing, we got it to scale, we're good to go. Right, so the next thing is, well, maybe I want to apply some trees, maybe I want to get some more information in here, maybe a sky, maybe there's actually quite a bit of background that could really help this drawing stand out, right? So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to select all of them, and let's go to Photoshop. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and quit Rhino so my computer definitely doesn't crash. It's going to say, I need to save. Sure, save. Yes, save the grasshopper too. So we're in Photoshop, and just about fitting the screen. Let's get that across. So let's go ahead and open a new, or sorry, create a new. And in our case, again, just 11 by 17, so 17 by 11. Resolution at 300 is probably okay. If I really wanted a fine drawing, I don't know about you guys, but I don't like any pixels, right? However, most computers can't handle above 300, right? But if you want a really nice drawing, you go for 400, you go for 350, right? Just a little bit more pixels per inch, right? So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. I'm going to take this quite literally and drag it into Photoshop. So if you don't have a double screen, you have to kind of separate the windows, and we'll drag it right in. Awesome. Probably the one cool thing about Adobe is that they're getting a little bit more integrated. That used to not be a thing. It would totally error out and never work. So glad to see that Adobe is listening to us somewhat. So let's go ahead and minimize Adobe Illustrator and talk a little bit about Photoshop. So like I was saying, it is a raster program, right? It treats certain things as smart objects and things like that. What is nice is it's going to stay to the exact same scale of whatever I did in Illustrator. It's going to stay the exact same colors, the exact same line weights, but you'll notice it turned it into one layer. I can't do anything with it. It's kind of solid the way it is. So that's why I say obviously do this first in Illustrator so that you can establish line weights, things like that, or drawing for that matter. Another thing that can be said is, oh man, I forgot to maybe get rid of something. Can definitely still do that. I can hit E for erase, and when I click, it's going to say, hey, this is still a vector object. You need to turn it into a rasterized object. That's okay. So I'm going to press OK and erase some of the bits that I don't need. Say this whole thing wasn't needed. I could make that a little bit smaller too, right? However, what I did want to do was add some background, some context. So the first thing is maybe the sky. So let's go ahead and make a sky layer. And there's basically a couple of ways that I can make a sky. The first one is very easy. I can just draw it, right? So in my case, maybe I just want this area, if you will, to be sky. So I'm going to load that up. Perfect. And get that there. And since it's going to be behind my line drawing, I don't have to get all fancy with the tracing, so that's kind of nice. And I could just apply this to my sky layer. Now, do I just fill this all in blue? No, right? Because that would just kind of be too much, right? So in my case, I want to go around some of my elements, right? So let's try something real quick. Let's go ahead and fill this in, and we'll use our bucket tool. Right? Obviously I don't want that color because I can't see anything. So is there any way I can make this bigger? I can't see all my tools. It's down there. There it is. Is that more tools? There it is. There. So let's just fill it in with something so that we can see it. Paint bucket tool. And we'll make sure it's on the sky layer. And I'll take my sky layer back, right? But as you can see, it's kind of just whitewashing it out, right? I still actually want to see the architecture behind it. So a couple things I could do. I could use my magic wand tool, right? And I could make sure that I'm on my vector smart object. We can actually just label that lines, right? A little easier to say. I'll make sure that it's on my lines layer and basically click. And as you can see, it sort of goes around some of the pieces, right? It's set to a tolerance of 16. The higher the number, the more pixels that it'll take. So for instance, if I take this to 1, you'll kind of see what happens. It definitely just kind of maxes out on tolerance. Usually 1 is really nice, especially if you have a closed drawing that comes from digital, right? So let's go ahead and get basically everywhere except the structure. Right, so I'll take all these pieces. Obviously, I'm going to be able to see that. I don't want to be able to see through it, so that's looking pretty good. We'll take that and we'll basically erase the inverse on that sky. So I can go to my sky layer. If I erase, oh no, it got rid of the wrong part, right? I do want to keep the sky in this case. So I'll go to my selection tool, right click, and select the inverse. So it's going to select the opposite of what I had. So now it'll erase from the structure itself. Sweet. Now I could do that in one full swoop, but now we're good to go. I can do Control D or Command D to deselect something. But already right there, that's looking pretty good, right? I mean, even for a gray sky background, now it's not the happiest of days, but now I do have this layer that I can manipulate and further change. And as you can see, it definitely needed a little bit more changing. I don't know about you, but I'm a stickler for kind of keeping things real. So let's change that actually to a sky. Now I don't have to do that tracing process again because I already have this piece. So for instance, I can take my magic wand tool again, enact sky, click anywhere, and it's going to grab that selection again. Pretty nice. So let's go ahead and let's paint a sky because that's an option. So I'm going to use my brush, B for brush, and I'm going to go with something more sky-like. Obviously maybe a blue. Maybe a light blue, kind of in there, Bob Ross style. I'm going to take my opacity, I'm going to change it to 0 or 1, because it can't go to 0, I guess. And I'm going to enlarge my brush, big time. And basically add to this piece. So I need the opposite, because right now it's sort of in both. Select the inverse, brush it. It's making it very slightly blue. I'm sure you guys can't really tell, so let's change my opacity a little bit and just give it kind of a blue in there. Kind of have a dark strip going on, so let's maybe change that to a white. Get a white strip going through there. Right, that would be the cloud in this case. But again, as I've mentioned before, we kind of want to go Toy Story 4 on this, right? We don't want to just keep it one color. And I like to basically mess with it a little more. Now on the projector, it honestly looks pretty bad. If I zoom in, yeah, it just looks bad. It looks way better on my screen, but that is what it is. Let's go ahead and actually go to the projector. So I'll look at the projector now and kind of do the same thing. Yeah, let's get some of that cloud information in there. Damn, where are we? It looks nice, right? However, if you didn't like that method, what I like about that method is super easy, super quick, especially if you're not talking as much as I am, right? However, we could use a true sky as well. And I know I'm reaching on the time. Give me about 11 more minutes. So let's type in sky. Let's go to Google. And let's type in sky texture. Texture is probably the most important word of this, or material, right? Because if I just type in sky, it's going to give me all kinds of things. But if I want brick, if I want trees, obviously, I can get those exact things. In my case, I don't want too much perspective. I don't mind some of the perspective, but it's got a little bit of color in here. That one's looking pretty good. I've used it before. I'm going to go ahead and right click and open that image in a new tab. That way it's the actual true image. In this case, usually when it's a true image, I can actually just take it over as well. So let's change that, and let's at least match some of that style. And like I said, you don't have to apply this Photoshop to every single one. I do want you to do it for at least one drawing, right? So maybe it's a section. right? I'm not having you guys do any elevations, so obviously not an elevation. So maybe the floor plan, right? Maybe it has some shade and shadow. Maybe there's some grass in the background. We sort of see the shadows of the people or something. Obviously, you know, I'll talk about this more, but the final is coming up next Thursday. Keep that in mind, right? Both model and drawings. So it should be a good use of that tomorrow holiday, right? It should be a good use now that some of our studio projects are a little bit lighter of a load now, right? So focus accordingly, because we're going to put this one in the hallway, and come on guys, keep up the great work. You're already killing it outside, so let's continue. But in that case, you know, I've got it fixed. I press enter. Obviously it came in as a new layer, so I want to put it behind my sky. And I need to erase everything that I don't need. So I need my selection again, that one that I already did. I'll click. Oh, in my case, I'll click on everything but the sky. I want to make sure that I get everything. And of course, it got kind of the weird erase marks that I was doing, and that's okay. But in my case, I do want to make sure that I get it all. Sweet. I need to right click and select the inverse. Or actually, I don't need the inverse. Select the inverse again, right? And go ahead and erase the one. Oh no, yes, I did have it right the first time. It's alright. You can always select the inverse. Oh no, I'm getting rid of the wrong one. So do make sure you're at the right layer and that you're erasing the right one. However, it did look like I did have it right, so man, just go with your gut. Am I right? Sweet. But now it's essentially getting rid of everything that I don't need of that sky and replacing the same piece, right? So obviously I can change those layers, I can turn them on and off and kind of go back and forth between them. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect. I'm going to turn off this sky and replace it with that sky. However, that's really, really saturated, right? It's almost like, bro, I see the sky before I see the architecture, right? And obviously we don't want that, right? So let's go ahead and take the sky. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur. So I can go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur. And since it's towards the background, it starts to fade out, right? It starts to get a little more faded. Maybe not that faded. That's looking pretty good. Right, but it starts to bring out the architecture, and I know that might be kind of hard to look at, especially in the projector, but the screen recording should be nice. Last but not least, let's maybe add a tree and some shade and shadow, right? Why not? So again, let's go to Google. Let's type in, and this one's kind of important too, tree in elevation, PNG, because I kind of want to save a step in terms of removing the background. You'll notice you see the checkerboard pattern, right? That usually indicates transparency. However, as you guys know, sometimes if I drag it and the image of the background is still there, that doesn't mean it's actually the background. So be aware of that. However, it could be loading. Let's test it. Take that guy in there. Voila, it is a PNG. Oh wait, no it's not, right? However, there's a way to get around it also in Photoshop, just in case. Yeah, that is the perfect tree. I don't want to go with anything else, sir. Okay, that's fine. Right, let's go ahead and label it tree. And we need to right click on it, blending options, and we basically need to take out the background. So we'll hit multiply, and dang, it already took it out. In most cases you actually have to move this slider and further take out the white, but as you can see, you can kind of see what that does. It's basically eliminating the color on whatever's closest to white and black, right? So in our case, I usually have to take that down a little bit. But of course, we want to be able to see through that tree, right? See the sky or the architecture coming through it. So let's do Command T, transform. And you know, the worst thing about trees is seeing multiple copies of them. So I like to actually mess with the proportion a little bit. You know, a little tall tree over here, right? And maybe we'll make it come out of the page. Why not? That's kind of stylistic. Go ahead and press Enter. I'm going to copy that tree, paste it. Control T again. I'm going to flip it because I don't want somebody to accidentally think I used the same tree even though I did. Right? We'll say that this one's maybe in the background. All right, we'll make it a little bit smaller. But again, nobody will ever know that those are actually the same tree. We'll go ahead and press Enter. I'm going to take my trees, since they're super saturated, and take them back, right? Because again, I need to see the architecture, not so much the tree. The trees are to help us place it in context. However, I don't need both of those pieces. And since I got that tracing earlier, I again just go back to my tracing layer. I'm going to use my magic wand tool and click. It gets pretty close anyway. Oh, my tolerance is at 1, that's why. There we go. Got everything. Could also just get the lines again, right? You know, just in case, right? A little bit more crisp. And again, I want to erase from the inside, so select the inverse and click on my tree. Both trees in this case, and just erase. Oh, they're not rastered. That's okay. You can right click and you can convert it to a smart object and then rasterize layer. I don't know if that does anything to the background. Doesn't look like it, so we're good. And well, we don't need to erase anything there except maybe a little bit of the outside if you wanted to. But I need to get the inside of this tree. There we go. Obviously I don't want it in the architecture, I want it to be behind that piece. Can't even erase it. Nice. Yeah, I don't mind actually the trees popping out a little bit. It's not too bad. However, the darkness, it looks like we're on a flat earth and we're just, you know, falling off the horizon here. So let's brighten that up a little bit, make it a little bit more stylistic. We'll go with the sky that I chose. I think it's this one, yeah. Which is why you should always label your layers, sky 2. And let's get fancy with it a little bit. Obviously it's always going to print a little bit darker. Actually on the projector, it looks like how it's going to print, a little bit lighter than what usually you see on the screen. So I'm going to go to mode, or sorry, image, adjustments, and some of my favorite tools are literally just all in adjustments. You know, you got your brightness and contrast, your levels, your curves, exposure, vibrance is one of my favorite ones. Usually I turn it 100% vibrant and actually desaturate it. Take some of that color out. Not too bad. But overall I think it does need to be lightened. However, I do have my selection tool, so it's only going to apply to that section, which I don't want. So I do want it to apply to the entire layer. So I'm going to go to image, adjustments, brightness and contrast, and let's brighten that up a little bit. Actually less contrast. Usually we want more contrast, but in our case the sky is already too pungent. So let's erase some of it. You know, get stylistic. Well, maybe not like that. We don't want it to look like Swiss cheese. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to change my hardness. And the way that I like to fade things out is actually with a large aperture, right? So I can start to kind of fade that out. Now again, it doesn't look very good in the projector, but it definitely looks a lot better on my screen. But again, it starts to look less flat earthy, right? And that it's actually disappearing in the background. What I could further do is actually add some more foliage, some more trees. What's nice is we have this wonderful Google image drive, right? Where I can say, I can quite literally say trees in elevation. The power of using the S. We might have to type in background trees. There we go. You know, something of that line. We're looking for those shrubbery kind of at the bottom. That's looking pretty good. That's actually looking pretty nice. Let's take that. Man, we gotta pay for it? No way. Open image in a new tab, and we'll take at least that shot. Go ahead and drag it in. And as you can see, this one is not a background, just like the other. So we know what to do. Take it, blending options, multiply, and further get rid of that background. Command T, right? Because those are pretty small, but again, they're just kind of in the background. It's looking pretty good. You know, it's at least getting most of the space. We'll say there's a little more. Maybe we can see some of the stems and things like that. It's looking pretty good. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous, right? So we want to obviously put it towards the background. and erase the things that we don't need again. Right, so let's go ahead and take that down a peg. And, you know, fake it till I make it. I could just erase it. Right? I don't always have to get so fancy. We can get it out of there. Obviously, I'd want to keep it in some scenarios, so maybe not so much. Let's go ahead and get that sky trace that we just did. Zoom out. And get all of our pieces. Oh, wrong sky. Or right sky. Anyway. Let's just do it on our lines. Yeah, there we go. Obviously get all those pieces. I kind of want to see those trees in the back. That'd be kind of cool. And for the most part, it looks like we got it. Sweet. So we'll take that, we'll select the inverse, and erase from those trees. I think it was layer 1. Sweet. Now I can kind of just go havoc, and it's going to get rid of what's actually necessary. Sweet. But yeah, now it looks like we're somewhere, right? To say the least. Hopefully a review for most of us. However, maybe a nice brief introduction if you've just never opened up Photoshop, which is just kind of what I'm assuming today. Anyway, we'll talk about it more as we continue, and how we get some shade and shadow and things like that. If you know, you know, go ahead and apply. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and end it here for today. Sound good? All right.